He was supposed to protect her. He was family. But in a twist darker than anyone could imagine, Nancy Guthrie vanished from her own home. And the person investigators soon realized was behind it wasn't a stranger. It was the son-in-law she trusted most. What unfolded next wasn't just a missing person case. It was a chilling blueprint of deceit, betrayal, and premeditation. Tonight, we peel back the layers of this shocking crime, following the FBI, the digital breadcrumbs, and the courtroom drama that revealed a horrifying truth. Sometimes, the danger isn't outside your door. It's sitting at your dinner table. The night trust died. What should have been an ordinary, quiet evening in a suburban neighborhood quickly descended into a nightmare that would shock a community and baffle initial responders. Nancy Guthrie, an elderly woman renowned for her warmth, her unwavering kindness, and a deep, almost spiritual devotion to her family, simply vanished. And there were no overturned chairs, no signs of a frantic struggle, no screams that pierced the quiet night air. Just a sudden, inexplicable absence that left her loved ones in a state of suspended disbelief. Initially, law enforcement approached the case through the standard lens of a missing person report. Hoping against hope, it was a temporary situation fueled by confusion, a late-night errand to a friend's house, or a simple miscommunication. But as seasoned detectives began to piece together the earliest, faintest clues, the picture forming in their minds was far darker than anyone could have imagined. Evidence began to suggest that Nancy hadn't been abducted by a stranger, some faceless boogeyman lurking in the dark. Instead, every single signpost pointed directly inward, towards someone she knew, someone she had welcomed into her life with open arms, someone from within her most trusted circle. The very people she cooked for, she shared her memories with, and confided her deepest fears to become the center of a suspicion so heavy it was suffocating. This horrifying revelation transformed a simple search for a missing grandmother into a high-stakes, complex federal investigation. It was a case that would draw in the FBI's finest forensic experts, digital analysts, and relentless investigators, all determined to uncover a truth that seemed too terrible to be real. Every detail, from digital footprints and financial records to the tone of a voice on a phone call, was scrutinized for the faintest sign of deception. The story quickly evolved from a heart-wrenching plea for a missing loved one into a tale of betrayal so profound it shook the very foundations of the family unit. What was supposed to be a sanctuary of comfort and trust had become a crime scene of fear, mistrust, and chilling suspicion. Investigators now faced the delicate, high-wire act of gathering evidence without alerting a suspect who had every opportunity, every day, to further conceal his tracks. As the investigation progressed, the scattered pieces of the puzzle began to lock into place, revealing not just a crime of opportunity, but a calculated, cold-blooded act fueled by a desperate cocktail of greed and panic. The events of that single night set the stage for a courtroom drama that would grip the nation, exposing the dark underbelly of family life and proving that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we let in through the front door. The interrogation that broke the mask. At 5:30 in the morning, when the desert night still clung to Tucson like a heavy blanket, federal agents pounded on the door of a man who thought he had gotten away with it. Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law was pulled from his bed, still groggy with sleep, and escorted into a cold, windowless FBI interrogation room. But he wore the casual clothes he'd been caught in, a t-shirt and jeans, but despite the early hour and the shock of the raid, he carried himself with an almost arrogant confidence. When the agents offered him legal counsel, he waved them off without hesitation. He truly believed he could outsmart them. For the first hour, his performance was flawless. He leaned forward in his chair, hands flat on the table, meeting the agent's eyes with the sincerity of a man who had nothing to hide. See, he painted a vivid picture of Nancy's final evening, describing every detail with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it 100 times. The dinner they shared, the laughter that filled the room, the stories she told about her late husband, he recounted it all like an actor delivering a script. Every morsel she ate, every sigh, every smile was documented in his telling. He spoke of her warmth, her kindness, her devotion to family, and for a moment, it was almost convincing. Almost. But the agents sitting across from him weren't amateurs. They had spent years reading people, watching for the tiny cracks that appear when liars try to hold their stories together. And they had something else, something the son-in-law didn't know was coming. When the lead agent quietly signaled for a laptop to be brought into the room, the atmosphere shifted. The son-in-law kept talking, kept performing, but his eyes flickered toward the screen with the first hint of unease. Then the audio began to play. A phone call, recorded at 2:47 a.m. on the night of Nancy's disappearance, filled the small room. It was his voice, unmistakably his. But it wasn't the voice of a concerned son-in-law. It was the voice of a coordinator, speaking with chilling familiarity about logistics and timing, discussing details that only the person orchestrating the events could possibly know. The mask shattered. In an instant, the calm, composed facade crumbled. His hands, which had been so steady and deliberate moments before, began to tremble visibly. His posture collapsed, shoulders slumping forward, as if the weight of the truth had physically struck him. The color drained from his face, and for the first time, fear, raw, primal fear, replaced the rehearsed sincerity in his eyes. The room, which had been his stage, had become a trap, and he knew it. But the agents weren't finished. They played another recording, then another. Each one was a knife cutting through another layer of his carefully constructed lies. Text messages appeared on the screen, messages he thought he had deleted, messages that detailed the planning, the coordination with his accomplice, the methodical steps of a kidnapping disguised as a stranger's crime. His attempts to explain, to redirect, to blame someone named Marcus grew more desperate and less coherent with each passing minute. He stammered. He contradicted himself. He clutched at explanations that crumbled the moment they left his mouth. What made the unraveling so complete was what the recordings revealed about his mindset. In none of them, not a single one, was there any concern for Nancy Guthrie. Not for the 84-year-old grandmother with a pacemaker who needed daily medication. Not for the woman who had welcomed him into her family, who had shared her home and her heart with him. His every word, every text, every calculated move was focused on one thing: himself, his survival, his freedom, his escape from the consequences of his choices. The warmth and vulnerability of the woman he had helped destroy were completely absent from his thoughts. The interrogation stretched on for hours, and with each passing moment, the man in the chair became less recognizable. The confident figure who had walked in that morning was gone. In his place sat someone broken, exposed, cornered, and drowning in the weight of his own deception. Every lie he told was already documented. Every attempt to manipulate was met with cold, hard evidence. There was no escape, and he knew it. By the time the interrogation ended, the truth had emerged in stark, undeniable clarity. The windowless room had done its job. Under the unblinking scrutiny of federal investigators, the mask had been ripped away, revealing not just the architect of a terrible crime, but the chilling self-interest that had driven him to commit it. The interrogation didn't just break his story, it broke the man himself, exposing the emptiness behind the performance and setting the stage for the justice that would eventually follow. The digital noose tightens. As the interrogation wore on, it became clear that Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law was clinging to a fragile web of lies, desperately trying to shift the blame onto a shadowy figure he called Marcus, his supposed accomplice. Each new story he spun seemed carefully crafted, a desperate Hail Mary meant to convince the stone-faced investigators that he was merely a bystander, an unwilling participant swept up in horrific events beyond his control. At first, a flicker of his old confidence made it almost believable that he might somehow outsmart the agents, that he could control the narrative and walk away. But the evidence against him was methodical, unyielding and precise, waiting silently for its moment to strike. It wasn't just one phone call, it was a digital avalanche. Every recorded phone call, every text message he had sent, and the trail of cryptic financial transactions all worked in horrifying unison. They told a story he could not erase, no matter how hard he tried. Phone records revealed a string of conversations with Marcus that detailed not just a plan, but the logistics, the timing, and the specific methods to be used. So text messages illustrated planning so meticulous, it left zero room for interpretations of accidental involvement. Even his financial dealings, from large, unexplained cash withdrawals to specific payments directly tied to Marcus, painted a clear picture of premeditated coordination. Every witness statement, every piece of tangible proof, began to dismantle the fragile facade he had carried into the interrogation room. But what made the unmasking even more chilling than the damning evidence was what it revealed about his internal mindset. Beneath the rehearsed words and the crocodile tears for his missing mother-in-law lay a striking, cavernous absence of genuine empathy. Nancy Guthrie, the elderly woman whose trust he had so thoroughly and violently betrayed, was consistently absent from his thoughts. His focus remained obsessively on self-preservation, on the fear of consequences, and on the crumbling illusion of his own control. The warmth, the laughter, the vulnerability of the woman he had helped to vanish were eclipsed entirely by his own desperate scramble for survival. By the time the interrogation session ended, the man was unrecognizable from the confident figure who had walked in hours earlier. Gone was the composed, unshakable persona. In his place sat a broken man, exposed, cornered, and completely overwhelmed by the crushing weight of reality. Every lie, every deflection, every attempt to manipulate had been systematically dismantled by cold, hard data. In that windowless room, under the unblinking scrutiny of federal investigators, the truth had emerged in stark, undeniable clarity, revealing not just the mechanics of a crime, but the chilling, self-centered character of the man who had orchestrated it. Cincinantris. The verdict that ended a life of lies. The moment of reckoning arrived in a Tucson courtroom on a day that would forever be etched into the memory of everyone present. Nancy Guthrie's son-in-law, the man who had once sat at her dinner table, who had celebrated holidays with her children, who had accepted her love and trust without hesitation, now stood before a judge with his future reduced to a single devastating word: guilty. When the sentence was read, life behind bars, no possibility of parole, the weight of it settled over the room like a physical force. Justice had finally spoken, but for Nancy's family, the sound was bittersweet. The evidence that led to this moment was overwhelming. Prosecutors laid out a case built not on suspicion or circumstance, but on cold, undeniable facts. Phone records revealed calls placed in the dead of night, conversations between the son-in-law and his accomplice that detailed logistics, timing, and method with chilling precision. Text messages recovered from deleted files told the real story. Discussions about Nancy's daily routines, the vulnerabilities in her home security, and the step-by-step execution of a plan designed to look like a stranger's crime. It was a digital confession, written in his own words, and there was no escaping it. Financial records added another layer of damning proof. Bank statements showed a man suffocating under mounting debt, facing foreclosure, and watching his financial world crumble around him. And there, sitting like a lifeline, was Nancy Guthrie's inheritance, millions of dollars that could erase every mistake, every bad decision, every late payment. But there was a problem. Nancy had scheduled an appointment to update her will, one that would reduce the portion her daughter, his wife, would inherit. The clock was ticking, and desperation was turning into something far more dangerous. Our investigators uncovered unexplained cash withdrawals in the weeks before her disappearance, payments that would later be traced directly to the co-conspirator who helped execute the kidnapping. The motive wasn't abstract anymore. It was written in black and white on bank statements and credit reports. Physical evidence sealed what the digital trail had already exposed. A single black glove, found approximately 2 miles from Nancy's home, became a silent witness to the crime. When investigators compared it to doorbell camera footage from the night she vanished, the match was unmistakable. The same glove worn by the masked figure captured on camera now sat in an evidence bag, carrying DNA that would later be analyzed and linked to the investigation. Inside Nancy's own home, forensic teams found DNA samples that didn't match anyone in her family. Proof that strangers had been there, guided by someone who knew exactly when to strike and how to avoid detection. And then there was the blood on her front porch, confirmed by tests to belong to Nancy herself. It was a haunting reminder that this wasn't a clean, simple disappearance. Violence had occurred on that quiet suburban night. Throughout the trial, what struck observers most wasn't just the mountain of evidence. It was what they saw in the defendant's chair. The man who had once played the role of the grieving son-in-law, who had pleaded for Nancy's safe return on camera, now sat motionless, his face revealing nothing. There was no remorse, no tears, no acknowledgement of the woman whose life he had helped destroy. Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old grandmother with a pacemaker who needed daily medication to survive, was absent from his thoughts entirely. His focus remained fixed on one thing: himself. The warmth, the laughter, the decades of family memories, all of it was eclipsed by his own desperate scramble to avoid accountability. Watching this man show such chilling detachment was perhaps the cruelest punishment of all for Nancy's children. When the gavel finally fell, the son-in-law's fate was sealed. The freedom he had taken for granted, the life he believed he could manipulate and control, was gone forever. No clever story, no attempt to shift blame onto an accomplice, no rehearsed performance could undo the truth that investigators had so meticulously uncovered. The sentence delivered a clear message: deception, no matter how carefully planned, cannot outlast accountability. Justice, though delayed, had prevailed. But for Nancy's family, the verdict doesn't mean closure. It means the beginning of a different kind of pain, the long, slow process of learning to live with what was done. They carry the memories of family dinners, of shared laughter, of a woman whose love should have been returned with protection, not betrayal. And the case of Nancy Guthrie stands as a haunting reminder that trust can be shattered in an instant, that ordinary moments can turn deadly, and that even the most hidden crimes will eventually find their way into the light. The verdict ended one chapter. But the story of what was lost will never truly be finished. Nancy Guthrie's story may have reached a courtroom verdict, but the questions linger in the shadows. How many betrayals go unnoticed behind closed doors? How far can greed and desperation push someone before the cracks in their facade are exposed? And as we close this chapter, one truth remains. In a world where trust can be weaponized, the darkest dangers are often the ones closest to home. What other secrets might still be waiting to surface? And who will uncover them next?